Llandudno murder. The biggest beach resort in Wales, Llandudno, welcomes around 9,400,000 tourists annually. The Grand Town is well known for its expansive bay and buildings from the Victorian era. It has two lovely beaches and is oddly located between the Great and Little Ormes. On May 27, 1988, Sophie Louise Hook, then 7 years old, was born in Cheshire, England, to Julie and Christopher Hook. Christopher worked at an advertising business, and Julie was a teacher. The couple wed in 1984 and had 4 kids: 9-year-old Gemma, 7-year-old Sophie, 5-year-old Joseph, and 1-year-old Ellie. In particular, Gemma and Sophie had a deep bond and enjoyed playing together. The most outgoing child in the family, according to the neighbors, was Sophie. It was said of Sophie that she was a cheerful and kind girl. With Julie's sister Fiona and her husband Danny Jones, who now resided in North Wales, the family was very close. Like the Hooks, the Joneses had 4 small children. The 8 youngsters had such a close kinship that those close to the family remember them more as Candace's siblings than as cousins. The Joneses invited the Hooks to join them in celebrating their son Luke's 9th birthday on July 29, 1995. The Hooks ate breakfast that morning and then drove the 90 minutes from Cheshire to Llandudno to attend the festivities. In 1995, the large house on Bryn Labia Road in Llandudno, owned by the Jones family, was valued at £200,000. The backyard was private, with a wooden gate and a hedge dividing it from the overgrown bridle path used for riding horses. The kids splashed around in the garden hose, played with each other, and explored a new tent that their grandparents, Pearl and Paul Roberts, had given them for their birthday. It turned out to be the perfect place for a happy afternoon. The children loved the new tent and pleaded with their parents to spend that evening in the garden sleeping in it. The garden was close to the bright patio lights and safe, so Julie and Christopher didn't worry too much. In addition, Fiona and Danny were in the house, sleeping only a few meters away. Julie and Christopher remember saying goodnight to their kids and sending them off to their garden-side camping stay. Later on, Julie remembers that she bid them farewell with a kiss and wished them a pleasant day. "I'll talk to you later." They would never again see 7-year-old Sophie alive. This would be it. In the tent, Sophie, her sister, and 2 of their cousins, Luke and Alex, took their sleeping bags and bedded down. They spoke about ghost stories, played games, and ate dinner. At 1 in the morning, Alex, the younger boy, decided to go inside because he was afraid. Danny, his father, made the decision to check on the kids before turning in for the night at 12:40 a.m. In case any of the children decided to come inside, he kept the rear door open. When Luke, Sophie's cousin, woke up at 2:30 a.m. and looked at the time, he saw that Sophie was still asleep in the tent with her sister. He returned to his bed, but when Luke awoke around 7:15 a.m. the following morning, he discovered his cousin Sophie was gone from the tent. The entrance of the tent was ajar from the early morning dew. Luke observed that Sophie's cherished plush giraffe, Blankies, which she carried with her everywhere, was still inside the tent during her absence. He subsequently remarked, if Sophie had run away, she would have taken him with her, indicating that he understood how connected she and Blankies were. Luke told his folks right away. After more than an hour of searching the house, the garden, and the nearby fields, Fiona and Danny were unable to locate Sophie. At 8:20 a.m., Sophie was formally reported missing to the authorities. Unbeknownst to Sophie's family, a local man had made a horrifying discovery an hour earlier, around the time Luke had woken up and discovered Sophie missing. Jerry Davies, 55, left his house at 7:10 a.m. to go for his regular dog walk along North Shore Beach. He saw what looked to be a cast-off mannequin while strolling down the shore, but when his dogs freaked out and fled the area, he sensed something wasn't right. When he looked into the mannequin, he discovered it was a girl's body. After removing his t-shirt and covering her lifeless corpse, Davies hurried to a nearby phone box to call the national emergency number, 999. Later on, Sophie Hook was identified as the girl, half a mile from her house on the beach, her naked body washed up. The following autopsy report contains graphic material. Viewers should use caution. After a thorough autopsy, it was discovered that Sophie had suffered severe injuries, including broken ankle and upper arm, as well as bruising all over her body. She had been sexually raped and had internal hemorrhage. The majority of her injuries, according to the medical examiner, were similar to those often sustained by victims of significant auto accidents who were killed. She had all of the wounds while she was still alive. According to the coroner, Sophie was in so much pain during the attack that she left tooth marks inside her bottom lip and on both sides of her tongue. In the end, she was strangled to death. At the eastern end of the promenade, next to a cliff known as the Little Orme, her body had been tossed into the sea. Because of the chilly seawater, her body temperature had fallen, making it impossible to identify when she passed away. Her body had been submerged in the water for at least 3 hours. It was discovered. The town was shocked by the crime. The family of Sophie was distraught. Gemma is not doing well at all, according to her mother. It is really hard to console her because she is so incredibly upset. She is so very depressed and furious. I want to be in heaven with Sophie, Gemma later remarked. Since the murderer had thrown the victim's body into the sea in an attempt to destroy any forensic evidence, police had a tough time apprehending her. Her pants, a pair of Marks and Spencer socks with a pink floral design embroidered on them, and her unusual pink and white Winnie the Pooh nightgown were never discovered. Authorities think that whoever killed Sophie was aware that the kids were spending the night in the garden tent. Interviews with every registered sexual offender in the area were the first step in the police investigation. Investigators would soon concentrate on one person in particular, a 30-year-old guy by the name of Howard Hughes. He had a reputation for riding his mountain bike late at night around the seaside town. He grew up quite quickly and had a remarkable appearance because of a chromosomal anomaly known as XYY syndrome. At age 11, he had grown to a height of 6 feet, and as an adult, he stood a towering 6 feet 8 inches. As a child, he also struggled with dyslexia, learning impairments, and behavioral issues. Hughes' father sent him to private schools when he was younger in the hopes that they would have a positive influence on him. However, Wexham decided not to continue his enrollment at Lindisfarne College in Wednesday after just 2 terms. Hughes' father tried to get the school to boost their tuition, but they wouldn't let him stay. They claimed that he frequently picked fights and harassed other students. He continued to behave disruptively throughout his adult life, throughout his adolescence. Hughes had a lengthy criminal past that included convictions for vehicle infractions, theft, burglary, assault, criminal damage, and threatening behavior in addition to weapons possession. He enticed a 7-year-old youngster into an abandoned building in 1981 when he was 16 years old, and an arrest record states that he exposed himself and made unwanted approaches there. He eventually made an attempt to choke a toddler. As the youngster related the event, he said, quote, "He lifted me and threw me down forcefully. He has extraordinary strength. He found himself on top of me, both hands clutching my neck. Up until Hughes departed, the boy feigned to be dead." Hughes was given a 2-year mental health supervision order after being found guilty of assaulting the kid. After being freed, Hughes moved back in with his mother, who had just split up with his father. After being freed, he developed a more violent and aggressive personality and started picking fights with strangers. His unruly conduct made it impossible for him to hold down a work. Over the years, Hughes' father offered him many positions inside the company, but he refused to take on any responsibility. Instead, he broke equipment and got into fights with coworkers. In the years between his release in 1995, Hughes was again accused of abusing young children, ages 3, 5, and 9. When several witnesses saw Hughes riding along a route that overlooked Sophie's location, suspicion was aroused. He was indeed seen lurking in the woods by one woman, to whom he said that he was searching for some money he had dropped. Because the walkway was close to the residence, he would have heard the kids talking, which suggested he might have known they were spending the night in the garden. In addition, a policeman who was cruising the town that evening at 2:55 a.m. noticed Hughes seated on a bench close to the seafront and struck up a conversation with him. Later, in the Joneses' yard, the police found a shoe print on a rhubarb leaf that, upon closer inspection, appeared to match Hughes's shoe. The same day the body was found, at 3:50 p.m., Hughes was taken into custody at the house he lived with his mother. While being questioned at the police station while in custody, he vehemently denied having anything to do with the murder. He attested to his having wandered the entire region, including the bridle path that ran back to Jones's home on that particular day. He denied killing Sophie, but he did admit that he was out and about when a policeman spoke with him in the early hours of July 30th. After being detained for 4 days, he was allowed to leave prison because there was insufficient evidence to prosecute him. Following a police search of Hughes' residence, pictures of minors were discovered, leading to Hughes' immediate rearrest. A cache of girls' knickers discovered by officers concealed in a stone wall. Other evidence, while circumstantial, soon surfaced. Amanda Roberts, a 6-year-old, came forward and said that at approximately 4 o'clock that Saturday afternoon, while she was playing in a park close to her house, Hughes approached her. The girl bolted when he tried to talk her into going with him. The Joneses lived less than 4 minutes bicycle ride from the park. Michael Geedy, a sex offender with a conviction, also came forward. He said that he had known Hughes and his mother while he was living next door. He reported to the authorities that Hughes would frequently confide in him about his depraved dreams of abusing young females. He claimed that throughout several of their conversations together, he expressed his desire to kidnap a girl, have sex with her, and then kill her. Hughes's father requested welfare visits, and the police granted him access. Hughes is said to have admitted to killing Sophie and sexually abusing her during that visit. In addition, Hughes gave his father the path he had taken to abduct Sophie. After discovering the truth, Hughes' father informed the police that his son had admitted to the murder while they were there. He also provided the police with information about where the child's clothes were found. Later on, Sophie's pajamas were discovered in the designated area. Official charges were brought against Howard Hughes for Sophie Hook's kidnapping and murder. June 24th, 1996 was the start of his trial. Because they didn't want Julie and their kids to experience more anguish, only Danny Jones and Christopher Hook went to the trial. The jury heard the testimony of 3 witnesses, one of whom was Hughes's father, even though there was no forensic evidence connecting Hughes to the crime. Speaking to the court, he said that his son had told him he had killed Sophie. In court, his father said that he informed his son, quote, "I must know if you did it, if he was going to stay in this room with him while he was in jail." It is then said that his son broke down and said, "I did it." Howard Hughes related how he visited the Joneses' back garden early on Saturday morning to see the kids getting ready for the celebration. "I went back there at about 2 in the morning, he stated. "I convinced a female to accompany me to the beach. When the girl began to scream, I covered her mouth with my hand and held it there until she stopped. I threw her body into the sea after removing all of her clothes." He said, quoting himself, "I've been sexually frustrated since 1990. Hughes went on to refute this admission afterwards. "You can propose what you like, but that is trash," his father said to the defense's argument that his confession may not have been to her murder, but rather to aid the authorities in locating Sophie's clothing. Jonathan Carroll, a 30-year-old career criminal who was incarcerated at the time of his testimony, was the second witness. He informed the jury that he had been searching for potential locations to rob. He heard someone walking down the street while he was in a garden. He watched Hughes walking down a lane with a sack a few moments later. Then he claims to have seen what appeared to be a human leg emerging from the sack. Michael Geedy, the third witness, described to the jury how Hughes had previously admitted to having deviant sexual fantasies about abusing young girls. The testimony of Alexandra Roberts, whom Hughes attempted to entice later that day, and the witnesses who saw Hughes at the bridal walk on July 29th were also heard by the court. Any claim that Sophie accompanied Hughes voluntarily was rejected by the court. Julie, Sophie's mother, said in Hughes's own words, "There have been rumors that Hughes forced Sophie out of the tent, and it's possible that when Sophie was first carried by Hughes, she thought it was her father or mother, and by the time she realized that it wasn't, it was too late." Hughes angrily denied having anything to do with the 7-year-old's murder, denying ever speaking with Michael Geedy, He also denied confessing to his father, claiming the latter had concocted a series of falsehoods to drive Hughes from the area. When questioned about Sophie's attire, he stated that he discovered the nightgown near a deserted property, some 0.5 miles from the house, by the side of a road. He claimed that he picked it up with the idea of replacing the toilet paper. He carried the nightdress for a time before discarding it over a hedge, without using it for this purpose. Hughes was accused by the prosecution of taking extreme measures to make sure there was no forensic link between him and the body. In order to guarantee that there was no forensic connection between him and Sophie, they told the court that he had shaven off his pubic hair prior to the murder. Although Hughes was known to wear the same jacket for months at a time without ever washing it, after the murder, it was supposedly laundered. Howard Hughes was found guilty of all 3 charges by the jury on July 18, 1996. After that, the 31-year-old was given 3 life sentences. It was suggested by the judge, Mr. Justice Curtis, that he never be allowed to leave prison. It was declared on November 24, 2002, that he would not be eligible for parole until he had served a minimum of 50 years in jail. Hughes will be allowed to be released in 2045 at the age of 80, according to this verdict. After Sophie passed away, a brass memorial was placed on the sand in her honor. Sophie's family suffered a great deal of guilt over her passing following her murder. Julie denounced the murderer, calling him, quote, "the world's most evil and horrifying monster. I just feel numb, completely and utterly numb," she remarked. Most people, I suppose, believe in goodness. It is really hard to believe that someone could be that wicked. I took great care to protect my kids. They were not permitted to cross the street by themselves. We are truly sorry that during her most vulnerable moment, we were unresponsive to her needs. That sensation won't ever go gone. Moving on to the next case. Jean Johnson. Jean Johnson, a widow from New Mexico, was 70 years old. In 2011, her spouse had died 8 years ago. Heidi Johnson, her daughter, was still with her. Jean texted Heidi a photo of the puppy she was minding for one of her friends on Sunday, May 26, 2019. Heidi tried to phone Jean on Monday night, but she didn't answer. Since the two of them often speak at least 3 times a day, she was concerned when she attempted again on Tuesday and got the same outcome. As it happened, she was right to be concerned. Heidi received a call from a friend Jean had been dog sitting for, informing her that Jean had not dropped off the dog on Monday as agreed. Heidi went to live with her mother. The entrance door stood open a little. The fact that the dog was still inside and had a few accidents suggested that he hadn't been allowed outside in a while. Jean had vanished from view. Her pistol was the only item she had lost. According to Heidi's statement to the police, Jean would only have taken it from her if there had been a mountain lion too near to her house or if she had been afraid. Jean's height and weight are reported to be 5 feet 6 inches, 130 pounds, green eyes, and light brown hair. Kyle Fleischman. The kind and amiable Kyle Fleischman, an Elon University alumnus, disappeared without a trace in 2007 after going to a comedy concert with friends and family. He was seen on surveillance leaving a bar and making his way to a local pizza place, but it's still unclear what he did after that. Kyle Fleischman was raised in Charlotte, North Carolina, along with his younger brother and sister. He was the son of Barbara and Dick Fleischman. His friends and family grew up to say that he was nice, giving, and well-liked by all. 2002 saw him graduate from Charlotte Catholic High School. He started his academic career at Elon University, where he is now pursuing a business administration degree. He was the peer-elected vice president of his fraternity, Kappa Alpha Order, during his time in college. Throughout his 4 years of college, he enthusiastically supported the Special Olympics and the Boys and Girls Club despite his fraternity responsibilities. Following his graduation from Elon in 2006, Kyle first returned to his Charlotte, North Carolina, parents' house. In 2007, he started working as a healthcare recruiter at Maxim Healthcare Services and moved into an apartment in South Charlotte with 2 roommates. Those who knew him describe him as trustworthy and say that even though he worked long hours, He always found time to fully enjoy life and his family. An outgoing person, Kyle had a large and varied group of friends, but although he was gregarious and charming with women, people who knew him well said that he was single when his nightmares began. When Kyle's mother was given a breast cancer diagnosis in the autumn of 2007, the family was greatly affected. Kyle was 24 at the time. Being close to his mother, Kyle gave her confidence that they will overcome it together. On November 8, 2007, Kyle invited his mother to a comedy event with Dane Cook at the Bobcats Arena, hoping to brighten her spirits. Noelle, Kyle's sister, made the same decision to go with her mother and brother. Kyle also scheduled a get-together with a few pals for that same night to go to the comedy show and get drinks. It was remembered that November had been especially crisp and frigid, with lows of less than 32 degrees Fahrenheit at night. Before the comedy gig on November 8, 2007, Kyle and his buddies got together at Daniel Scagnelli's residence. Rather than taking their cars into the city to witness the event, they opted to order a cab because they intended to consume alcohol. After dropping Kyle's car off at Daniel's, they went to a nearby pub for some food and drinks before heading to witness Dane Cook's set. They were joined at the event by Kyle's mother and sister, and it seems like they all had a terrific time. Kyle was said to have been in a happy disposition the entire time. Barbara and Noelle thanked Kyle for a fantastic evening as they made their way home after the show, following their final goodbyes to his family, which they had no idea would be their last. Kyle and his buddies spent the rest of the evening at the well-known sports bar in uptown Charlotte called the Buckhead Saloon. The pub, which draws a younger clientele, was busy as usual on Thursday night. According to Kyle's buddies, there was a lot of partying that evening. At the busy bar, they had drinks, chatted with old friends, and made new ones. Friend Daniel noted during the evening that Kyle never seemed overly drunk and that he seemed to be in a good mood. With the stroke of midnight, Kyle's friends said goodbye and slowly drifted away, leaving him with his best friend Daniel. Daniel asked Kyle if he was coming along when he thought it was time to call it a night at 1 in the morning. But Kyle wanted to keep the night going a little bit longer, promising Daniel he would grab a cab later to get his car. Daniel had no idea that this brief encounter would mark the final time he would see his pal. When Daniel awoke that early in the morning, Kyle had left a missed call. Since Kyle did not leave a voicemail, he did not give the missed call much thought at first. When he attempted to reach him again, his phone went straight to voicemail. Daniel claims he thought Kyle was still sleeping from the previous night, which is why he did not answer his phone. But as the morning wore on, Daniel saw Kyle's car remain parked in front of his house. Daniel said that's when he started to worry because this wasn't like his closest friend, who had always been the one in charge. He attempted to reach Kyle once more, but the calls ended up in voicemail. The flatmate of his best friend answered the phone after he did, informing him that Kyle had not come home that evening. Daniel was apprehensive to phone Kyle's parents at first since he didn't want to disturb them, but eventually he got in touch with them since he thought Kyle would be at their house. But when they spoke more, Daniel became concerned to hear that Kyle's family had also missed calls from the 24-year-old early on November 9th. Before daybreak. None of the family members who were contacted had received the calls because of the late hour, and they stated that they hadn't spoken to Kyle since the previous evening. They eventually reported that, despite their best efforts, they were also unable to contact him. Trying not to panic, the family did not give up. It was quite probable that Kyle had overindulged in alcohol and spent the night sleeping on someone's couch. In order to find out if Kyle would get to work on time, they waited. But when Kyle failed to appear at work, his family filed a missing persons complaint with the authorities. But the family found out that they had to wait 48 hours to report Kyle missing because he was an adult. The family made the decision to start their own inquiry in the interim. To assist spread the message, Daniel made a Facebook page for the missing person and they hired a private investigator. The Facebook page garnered 60,000 followers in just 2 weeks. Ultimately, the police used the CCTV footage from the bar to start their investigation and spoke with customers who were there when it happened. The detectives created a timeline of events with the help of the witnesses and the security footage. The CCTV footage shows Kyle talking to a woman at the bar after Daniel left around 1 in the morning. The woman seemed to be at the institution with her partner. Then Kyle and the woman danced together, which clearly infuriated her boyfriend. The time when the man approached Kyle with his two pals and they started talking was also caught on camera. The man and the woman left the institution as a result, even though this scenario did not turn into a violent conflict and the discourse was just mild. Kyle called his sister at 2:19 in the morning, but she didn't answer and he didn't leave a note, so it's unclear why he called. In the moments that followed, Kyle appears to have forgotten his debit card and his coat when he left the bar around 2:20 in the morning, according to security footage. Kyle had given his debit card to the bartender when he arrived, just like many other customers, and his drinks were added to his bill all night long. It's possible that Kyle truly forgot about the open tab because the barman noted that it's rather normal for individuals to forget their cards at closing time. Many believe that Kyle was more inebriated than Daniel had previously believed, which would account for him forgetting his coat in the bitterly cold 32-degree temperature outdoors, as well as his error with his debit card. But the family's private investigator presented a different angle, suggesting that Kyle might not have been drunk when he decided to leave his possessions behind, and instead had made a conscious decision to leave the bar quickly. The private investigator's theory states that Kyle might have intended to return to the pub later to retrieve his stuff and planned to catch up with the woman he was dancing with. It's also possible that he departed quickly to prevent any further conflicts. The exact reason for his actions is still up for debate and speculation. Still, 2:30 a.m. was the next verified sighting of Kyle. One can observe Kyle strolling along College Street in the direction of Fuel Pizza, a pizzeria. Kyle could be seen strolling from right to left in the video. Even though Kyle didn't seem to be stumbling, it was difficult to tell from the shaky video whether or not he was overindulged in alcohol. Police were informed by a Fuel Pizza employee that Kyle had entered the establishment and requested an enormous pizza with every topping possible. Although there was no CCTV at the pizza restaurant, Kyle's father was able to verify that his son frequently placed extravagant pizza orders. That's why he knew it was Kyle when he heard about the pizza with everything on it. As the restaurant filled up with late-night patrons, the staff member failed to observe whether Kyle was leaving by himself or with a companion. Kyle picked up the phone a few times after he left the restaurant. He may have contacted the Buckhead Saloon at 2:42 a.m. to find out what was remained of his possessions. 10 seconds was all that the call lasted. Sadly, nobody responded. Then, between 2:42 and 2:57 in the morning, Kyle made 4 calls to his father's business phone. This was peculiar since Kyle would have known that his father would not be working in his office at that early hour. Kyle called people and, as he has in the past, failed to leave voicemails. Kyle was still in the uptown Charlotte region at the time of the calls, based on his cell phone records. Around 3:25 a.m., a cab driver reported seeing Kyle strolling on North Davidson Street, nearing the 110 block near Hunter Record Business. This was the next confirmed sighting. Kyle didn't have a coat on and looked drunk, according to the cabbie. Although Kyle was not a newcomer to Charlotte, residents claim he should have known that the neighborhood, known as Noda, was home to gang members and drug traffickers who controlled the area with a very hard hand. The neighborhood was not just unsafe, but it was also the opposite way from Kyle's condo. At 3:28 a.m., just 4 seconds after the cab driver's sighting, Kyle made a brief phone call to his best friend, Daniel. He then tried to call his flatmate at 3:29 a.m., but the line was cut off after just 6 seconds. Similar to the earlier calls, Kyle left no voicemail. It's likely that when he made the last 2 calls, his phone's battery was nearly dead. Phone records show that by 4 a.m., Kyle's phone was completely dead. Since then, nothing has been done with it. The reason why Kyle made 8 calls without leaving a voicemail after leaving the Bucket Saloon baffled investigators. The reason for these calls has long been a matter of conjecture. While some speculated that he might have been in need of assistance and was trying to find a ride, others think he might have been in distress. The motive behind his calls is yet unknown till more information is found. For more than a week, a tremendous search was conducted for Kyle. In addition to police and firefighters, there were about 300 volunteers present, including Kyle's terrified friends and relatives. However, in spite of their greatest efforts, no leads came up. In addition to asking Public Safety Dogs Incorporated for help, his family posted flyers throughout the city. Mike, Craig, and Linda Dunn established Public Safety Dogs Incorporated, a nonprofit that trains various scent dogs to support law enforcement in search and rescue operations. Taking up the investigation, Mike and Linda looked for Kyle using the scent from the coat that was left behind at the pub. They began following the smell from Fuel Pizza, Kyle's last known location, using 2 different dogs. In little time at all, both canines followed a scent track that led them to College Street. The dogs followed Kyle's scent in a broad circle, indicating that he may have traveled in a big circle to get away from someone he thought was pursuing him. After following the scent trail, they eventually arrived at Cordelia Park, which is roughly 2 miles from the Buckhead Saloon, via North Davidson Street and a tiny bridge. Situated in the Villa Heights neighborhood of North Charlotte, Cordelia Park is a 24-acre popular park to visit during the day. But at night, drug dealers and gang members congregate in the park, drawing a harsher population. Given the possible risk and danger, Kyle's family is dubious that he would have gone to that place voluntarily at night. When it got dark and they saw a few questionable people, the dog handlers, Mike and Linda, decided to end their initial search for Kyle in the park. The next morning, they started their hunt again. The canines detected the scent from the park, which sent them to a construction site 200 yards from Cordelia Park at 16th Street in North Davidson. It is possible that Kyle's body was disposed of at the construction site because Linda described what she smelt as the scent of death when she arrived there. The dirt had just been turned over at the construction site, where a new residential block was being built. It was possible that someone had used the building site to hide a body, but it was also possible that the smell came from bodily fluids that Kyle did not have. Despite conducting a comprehensive search, the scent dogs were unable to find any noteworthy clues. Worried, the police were called, and they brought in cadaver dogs. Dogs trained to sniff out the fragrance of human remains rather than that of a living person. The cops then used ground-penetrating radar and physically poked sticks into the earth to thoroughly search the whole building site. But in all their thoroughness, they found nothing of any importance. After a while, work at the location resumed, possibly removing any more evidence or hints that might have surfaced during the inquiry. Since Kyle vanished, nothing has happened to his financial accounts. It's estimated that when Kyle vanished, he had just roughly $6 in cash on him. There was never a sign of Kyle Fleischman, even after thorough searches. Many theories have been proposed, but none of them have been verified. Kyle's family has been frustrated by the case's lack of progress and believes that important information is currently being withheld by certain individuals. In contrast to the many hypotheses and rumors that have circulated around the community, Dick, Kyle's father, says he thinks his son was the victim of an arbitrary crime. He speculates that his kid might have wandered up North Davidson Street in the middle of the night since he was inebriated and disoriented. He wonders if Kyle was killed and his body placed at what was then a construction site at North Davidson and 16th Street, or if someone driving by saw what appeared to be an easy target for a heist. In the end, the family relocated out of Charlotte in 2010 and settled on Hilton Head, South Carolina, before relocating to Florida, where they are now residents. Kyle was 24 years old and 6 feet tall at the time of his disappearance. He had green eyes and brown hair, and he weighed about a pound 180. He had a pair of keys, his wallet, and his cell phone with him at the moment. It was well known that Kyle had no enemies. Moving on to the next case. Patricia Carnahan. The body of an unnamed woman was discovered in a state park in 1979. The case remained unsolved for many years. It wasn't until 2023 that important breakthroughs, such as improvements in forensic science and interstate cooperation, gave fresh insight into the enduring enigma and led to the attacker's prosecution. The date was September 28, 1979. At the Sugar Pine Point State Park campground on Lake Tahoe, a woman's body was found. She looked as though she had been strangled and had been severely battered and wounded. She was wearing some jewelry and was probably in her early 40s. She carried a wristwatch, a necklace of a deer, and a few rings. The three individuals who found her dead did not contact the police right away. Rather, they made a call to a nearby newspaper and disappeared. After that, the reporter notified law enforcement. Due to outstanding arrest warrants, police discovered that the three guys had neglected to report their discovery. For this particular offense, they were all exonerated. Remarkably, an autopsy would show that Jane Doe was probably still alive when they found her. She was subjected to an SA kit test since it seemed like she had been abused. To gather evidence, these kits include sterile containers, combs, microscope slides, collection bags, and other items. With the aid of these kits, victims' hairs, saliva, blood, and other bodily fluids are removed in order to establish the assault and identify the culprit. It was discovered that she had taken significant hits to her body, and there were defensive wounds that showed she had retaliated. Around the picnic area on the western side of the lake, there were several indications of fighting, and the victim misplaced one of her flip-flops in her attempt to flee her attacker. The investigating cops spotted an empty beer bottle beside the body, which they mistakenly bagged despite finding very little other evidence. Forensic technology was not as developed in 1979 as it is now. The body was kept for a very long time in the morgue, and the evidence was filed away. The decision was made to bury the unidentified woman in an unmarked grave in a potter's field in El Dorado County, since no one came forward to claim her. As it was then, Lake Tahoe has always been a well-liked vacation spot. People from all over the world constantly flock to the beaches and campsites, so it was challenging to find this woman. She can be from wherever. There was no way to find out who she was or how she got there at the time because police did not find a car or any other possessions. Due to technological limitations, it was deemed a cold case and was withdrawn from consideration. The victims and the beer bottle's DNA were examined years later, in 1986, when the technology of DNA testing was developed. It was evident the attacker owned the bottle, but until decades later, nothing more was done. In 2014, investigating officer John Gaines took up this case, some 36 years after it began. He reopened Jane Doe's files from Lake Tahoe. It opened cases from the 1970s, 1980s, and 1990s as part of El Dorado County's cold case unit. He dug out the body in the Jane Doe case at Lake Tahoe. In an effort to identify her, he printed pictures of her jewelry to be distributed to the public while accompanied by a forensic anthropologist from California State University, Chico. Local publications ran the photos, but there were few leads. Gaines took attention of the necklace and discovered that the deer necklace was actually a high pendant, symbolic of the Jewish life emblem. According to him, Elvis Presley used to wear a pendant similar to this while performing. Gaines tried his luck with the local Jewish community using a high pendant as a lead. Rabbi Morty Rickler, a local rabbi in Lake Tahoe who had recently opened a Chabad center, expressed surprise when police contacted him. Since the Chabad is seen as a Jewish community center, cops are not frequently seen there. It is a sacred location of tranquility and purity. After hearing the details of the situation, Rabbi Rickler was eager to assist and inform the neighborhood. When the body was found in 1979, very few Jewish families had recently moved to the Lake Tahoe region. Over 1,000 Jews lived in the region, and there were now 2 synagogues. 3 plainclothes officers with firearms and badges paid Rabbi Yossi Grossbaum a visit in September 2015. Gaines arrived in Folsom, California, hoping to make contact with the victim's living relatives. In Northern California and throughout the state, Rabbi Grossbaum disseminated the information. Eventually, a family identified the pendant in the press and stepped forward. The claimed victim's daughter and the remains underwent a DNA test, and the results showed a match. Patricia Carnahan, who would have been 35 years old at the time of her death, was eventually identified as the body. Patricia, who was originally from Virginia, had left on a solitary road trip through California. She had a red Volkswagen bus under her belt. She never made it home, despite having called her family to let them know she was on her way. In October 1979, a month later, the family filed a missing persons report. Her vehicle was retrieved from a Venice, California dealership. It appeared that the car had been left unattended in the lot. Regretfully, no connection was established because she was a Virginia missing persons case. In addition, the perpetrator's DNA and Patricia's DNA profile were deposited into Cody's, the FBI's unified DNA system. But no one could match that for many more years. After that, her body was given to her family so they could bury her properly, and 26 years after her tragic death, she was placed to rest. But the offender continued to be at large. Years later, the attacker was apprehended due to a totally different series of events. The Washington State SAKIT initiative, which sought to reactivate abuse inquiry testing from the 1970s onward in an effort to apprehend the offenders, received financing from the state of Washington in 2023. One of the few police departments with full-time personnel dedicated to abuse probe test cases was the Spokane Police Department. More than 250 of the more than 1,500 kits in the SPD were matched using the combined DNA index approach. This resulted in an enormous discovery. A man in Spokane was charged in 1994 of having his way with a homeless woman. She sent the police a complaint on the occurrence, had herself tested to confirm her allegation, and designated Harold Carpenter as the person who had attacked her. He was arrested for coercing her against her will in the second degree, but the woman chose not to pursue legal action, therefore the case was dropped. Harold Carpenter asserted that he did not defile her, and that their relationship was consensual. His word was therefore in opposition to hers. The test kit was uploaded into Cody's after being filed away. The DNA on the system matched Patricia Carnahan's body and the empty beer bottles, but the woman who had filed the complaint had long ago passed away. After more research, Carpenter was identified as being close to the incident on September 29, 1979, when he was detained for driving under the influence in Susanville, California. In addition to being charged for a second non-consensual event involving a woman in 1994, Carpenter was arrested for a number of misdemeanors between 1990 and 1993. Prior to his divorce in 1998, he was married and resided in Sandpoint. She had accused him of domestic abuse. He was charged with possession of illegal narcotics, reckless driving, multiple DUIs, and disturbing the peace in Bonner County between 1998 and 2018. Other than one DUI in 2000, he didn't have anything on file in Washington. After being made homeless in 2016, Carpenter moved to Spokane Street. He was detained as a suspect in a different non-consensual case in Spokane County in 2018. However, the allegations were not validated. His homelessness was discussed in an article that appeared in the Inlander in 2020. You simply got through it. Simply step outside and attempt to avoid the snow, rain, or other elements. He was under suspicion for an alleged groping incident in 2022, but once more, no arrest was made. He relocated to Spokane's downtown Park Tower apartments. El Dorado County investigators now had a reason to make an arrest of him, and the Spokane Police Department assisted in Carpenter's whereabouts. The 63-year-old was apprehended on March 1, 2023, for the murder of Patricia Carnahan, and he was brought to justice as a result of the cooperation of multiple states' agencies. The Spokane case was not pursued because of the statute of limitations, and no charges were brought against him in that specific case. He is being held in Spokane County Jail without bond while he waits to be extradited to El Dorado so that he can face charges for his actions. The long-running cold case was eventually solved. Thanks to forensic technology advancements and cross-state agency cooperation, Patricia Carnahan's attacker was identified 44 years later. Nearly 50 years later, the mystery surrounding the 1979 Lake Tahoe Jane Doe has been solved. Moving on to the next case. Sabrina Underwood. Nestled in the northwestern Arkansas Ozark Mountains, Huntsville, Arkansas, was a small, tight-knit rural town in the 1990s. The town was a place where community ties were strong and life proceeded at a slower pace compared to larger urban regions. Its character was profoundly anchored in its historical and agricultural traditions. Throughout the 1990s, Huntsville's community life was characterized by a strong sense of solidarity. Locals were frequently acquainted, and the town's social fabric was knitted by a variety of neighborhood activities. Every year, the people of Huntsville eagerly anticipated the town fairs, parades, and festivals. These events gave participants a chance to socialize and cement their ties to the community in addition to offering entertainment. This rustic setting served as the setting for the tragic story of Sabrina Underwood. On January 20th, 1991, Sabrina Underwood, then 19 years old, vanished from sight after her mother let her off at the U.S. Highway 41262 in Boone County, close to Bear Creek. At the time, Sabrina was traveling to Calico Rock to see her boyfriend who was serving time in jail. The neighborhood was shocked by Sabrina's abduction, and her mother never saw her again. There were months of tense anticipation after Sabrina vanished. Then, on April 8, 1991, a somber finding stunned the town. A hunter discovered human remains close to the Gum Springs Cemetery, northwest of Little Rock, along with hair, underwear, and an ear stud. It was determined that the bones belonged to Sabrina Underwood, whose destiny was very different from what she had intended to accomplish. The cause of Sabrina's death was initially ruled as unknown, which sparked a laborious and devastating investigation. Law enforcement agents put in a great deal of effort in interviewing suspects, following up on leads, and trying to piece together the details of her case. Their diligent work went unrewarded as the case eventually fizzled out, leaving Huntsville under a cloud of unanswered mystery for years to come. The darkness would not lift for over 30 years. A crucial tip surfaced in July 2022, launching the probe once more. A startling and unsettling confession letter was in the possession of a local lawyer whose client was serving time in an Arkansas state prison. When his estranged wife Kirsty Headley was killed in 2018, the client, Rick Allen Headley, was already serving a life sentence. The confession letter gave the long-abandoned case new life by revealing graphic details of Sabrina Underwood's terrible demise. Rick Allen Headley was questioned by detectives right away regarding the contents of the confession letter. His shocking information would throw light on the horrific crime that had been hidden for almost 30 years. Headley confessed to the crime, and his account read like a terrifying story that had come to pass in the sleepy town of Huntsville. Headley's admission, according to the affidavit, gave a bleak impression of Sabrina's last moments. At a gas stop, he said, Sabrina approached him and asked for a ride. Headley would be plagued by the events of that ride for years to come. In a startling change of events, Sabrina approached Headley and startlingly demanded money, threatening to harm him if he rejected her advances. Headley told a terrifying story of the events leading up to Sabrina's terrible end. Following their sexual session in his truck, Sabrina told him she would require a large payment from him or she would disclose that he had hurt her. Headley was taken aback by this news and realized that trouble was ahead. The subsequent occurrences were really terrifying. Though the seriousness of the situation weighed hard on him, Headley made the decision to leave Sabrina behind and drive away. He felt that he had to prevent her from ruining his life. At this time, he attacked her outside the truck with great violence. He carried her into a little graveyard that was concealed from onlookers' gaze in a startling and gory act. The account of the actual slaughter is really frightening. Headley admitted to severing Sabrina's neck with a Rambo-style knife that had a compass attached at the end. He gave a vivid account of how he snapped the bone and removed her head from her body by hammering on the knife blade with a rock. He said that his goal was to make sure Sabrina never found out what had happened to her. After doing this horrific deed, Headley hid Sabrina's body from sight by covering it with logs and foliage. Then he collected her possessions and put them close to her body. The knife and rock used in the horrific act were thrown into a stretch of woods many miles distant. Headley took off his blood-stained clothes at his mountain home apartment, threw them in a garbage bag, and showered to rid himself of Sabrina's blood. His garments were in the garbage bag that was thrown in the dumpster behind the mall. Headley then walked out of the place. In addition to sending shockwaves across Huntsville, Headley's confession gave Sabrina's family, who had suffered through decades of suffering and uncertainty, some degree of comfort and closure. A much-needed turning point in the pursuit of justice in the unsolved Sabrina Lynn Underwood case has been reached with the apprehension of Rick Allen Headley. He is currently being charged in relation to Sabrina's case, and the community is eagerly awaiting his anticipated court appearance in Fulton County Circuit Court in late November 2023. The case serves as a sobering reminder of both the small-town community's unwavering spirit and the police enforcement's unwavering loyalty. Moving on to the next case. Shelley Ann Warner. Imagine a small town in the summer of 1980 where everyone was laughing and life seemed to go on without a hitch. However, in the heart of this town, called Mishawaka, a terrible tragedy occurred that would haunt the residents for the rest of their lives. Shelley Ann Warner, at 15 years old, vanished from sight on June 15, 1980, leaving her family devastated. Her lifeless body with a gunshot wound to the head was discovered next to the Madison Road railroad tracks 10 agonizing days later. In a quiet village, how could such a horrific act take place? Who may have committed this heinous act? The bustling commercial city of Mishawaka, in northern Indiana, has a certain charm all its own. Thanks to Penn Township's ideal location along the St. Joseph River in St. Joseph County, everyday life is set against a breathtaking backdrop. With a population of roughly 51,000, the city is delighted to be called the Princess City. In Mishawaka, new residential subdivisions and established neighborhoods coexist. The city was carefully designed to promote a strong sense of community and connectedness. The people there are well known for their generosity, camaraderie, and mutual love of adventure. A horrific incident that irrevocably ruined Mishawaka's tranquility and etched its name in the annals of tragedy occurred even in this close-knit community. On July 4, 1964, Shelley Ann Warner was born, although not much is known about her early life. She shared a home in Mishawaka, Indiana, with her mother, Kathleen Warner. Following the split of her parents, Shelley was raised by her mother. Her mother was an elementary school teacher in the neighborhood. At the tender age of 15, Shelley enrolled at Mishawaka High School, where she played sports and sang in the band. She was single and had no enemies that she was aware of. Young Shelley had a bright future ahead of her and was motivated to achieve her objectives. She was optimistic and lively. At the moment, Shelley was brimming with youthful energy and enthusiasm for life's possibilities. She had no idea that fate had other ideas for her. Mishawaka's quiet routine was upended on June 16, 1980, by an occurrence that would leave the community irrevocably traumatized. Shelley Ann Warner, a 15-year-old Mishawaka high school student, started out on what was meant to be a normal day. She drove her 1973 Volkswagen 2 miles to the nearest Wilkes grocery, wishing her mother Kathleen a fond farewell. Time passed, and there was an eerie calm surrounding the Warner residence. Shelley hasn't returned to her house in more than an hour. Kathleen quickly began to experience terror and anxiety. Kathleen waited a little longer, till she was forced to phone the police due to her desperation. Her voice faltered when she told the authorities about her daughter's disappearance. At first, the Mishawaka Police Department handled the case as a missing persons case because they believed it included a young runaway. But as time passed, a horrifying insight became clear. After a torturous 24 hours, Shelley was still nowhere to be found. As their degree of concern grew, investigators quickly modified the investigation status to suspected abduction. There were no overt indicators of foul play, which left detectives perplexed in those early hours of desperation. Kathleen's first call was reported as a regular missing person, but nothing had changed by the next day. Mishawaka town was now under the shadow of suspicion, setting the stage for an unsettling mystery that would unfold over many years. Following an immediate inquiry, the authorities learned that Shelley had arrived to Wilt's supermarket on June 16th of that year. At approximately 1:30 p.m., she was seen shopping for groceries, and at approximately 2 p.m., she was seen exiting the store. She made her way to her car, which was parked roughly 50 feet from the store's entrance. But things took a turn for the worst as soon as she got into her car. A man with blonde hair, who appeared to be between 16 and 18 years old, with a height of 5'7" and a weight of approximately pound 130, was observed skulking around the shop. The young man allegedly approached Shelley's automobile further closely, according to witnesses. Abruptly, he took over the driving and shoved Shelley into the passenger seat. They claim that Shelley looked taken aback by the abrupt intrusion. The witnesses could only see the man's back. As a result, it was difficult to tell if Shelley was in danger or if someone was using a weapon to silence her. Shelley was in the passenger seat when the man quickly drove off. It was an astonishing and frightening conduct that left bystanders perplexed. Anxious family members and friends launched a big collective hunt to see if anyone might learn anything about the missing little child. Authorities issued a drawing of the first suspect based on the witness's statement in an attempt to enlist the public's assistance. A terrible discovery made a few hours later made them even more afraid of the unknown. Shelley's automobile was discovered abandoned in the parking lot of the neighboring OSS Shoal, Indiana shopping center. There was no trace of a scuffle inside the car, and Shelley was not present. As investigators attempted to piece together what had transpired, they kept looking for information. Two young females were exploring a wooded region outside of South Bend, Indiana, after 10 days of suffering and frustration when they saw an awful sight. A young woman's half-nude body was discovered in a ditch next to the railroad tracks. The young lady was later identified as Shelley Ann Werner by dental records. It was evident from the scene that she had died there. Two close-range shots in her were fired with a large-caliber gun. The investigation was a crazy journey with lots of leads and no leads. Hypnosis was the final desperate measure the police took in their quest for answers. For witnesses from the grocery shop were put under hypnosis in the hopes that they might recall important details regarding Shelley's kidnapping. The first suspect was given a fresh sketch after these hypnosis sessions, which revealed that he had been dropped off at the business and looked to be hitchhiking. Prior to entering the store, Shelley was allegedly observed talking to two young women by the witnesses. However, no one was aware of the identities of those two women or their potential connection to Shelley's kidnapping. Every attempt was made by law enforcement to capture the criminal. However, they were not successful. Many men who fit the description were taken in by the police. However, none of them could be recognized in a lineup as the kidnapper. Because neither the man who dropped off the suspect nor the two young women Shelley had spoken to could be found, the authorities were frustrated and the case remained unresolved. The ledge eventually dried up, ending the inquiry. The murder of Shelley had long puzzled the investigators. Her cause of death remained a mystery, and she appeared to be an ordinary high school student. It's interesting to note that witnesses claimed Shelley seemed shocked when the man got into her car. It was impossible to rule out the idea that she knew who killed her. Shelley Werner's kidnapping and murder soon became a cold case, a long-hanging, terrible mystery that plagued Mishawaka. The investigation was taken over by the Cold Case Division of the Mishawaka Police Department following the ST. In late 2021, the Joseph County Metro Homicide Unit was dissolved. Their mission was to solve the riddle that had troubled them for years. With time, Shelley Werner's unsolved murder has cast a long shadow. However, a significant witness came forward in April 2023, 43 years later, throwing new light on the horrifying case and offering a ray of hope in the shadows. At last, the witness, a woman who had been silent out of fear for her family's safety, missed her opportunity to speak up. This witness had been intimidated by the suspect. In order to solve the case, Detectives Dave Dossman, Tim Corbett, and Sam Walsh worked non-stop, according to Jim Campbell. The testimony of the witness was a paradigm-shifting discovery. She identified the three people in charge of killing Shelley, but the authorities withheld their identities. It was shocking to learn that Shelley knew very little about these individuals. Since they were older than she was, she most likely only knew their family. However, the authorities have not disclosed the reason for her injuries or the perpetrator. Two of the suspects died over the years. The fact that one had died in 2001, the second had also perished in 2010, and the third had vanished into thin air had not previously been known to the detectives. The inquiry into Shelley's kidnapping and subsequent murder was reopened as a result of this new information. When investigators looked more closely into the past of the three individuals, they discovered a horrible history of violence. Confirming the first witness report, these men seem to have played a direct role in the untimely death of Shelley. The witness only felt safe talking to the authorities after two of the accused had died. The police eventually found out. For the aim of investigating unresolved homicide cases like Shelley's, the Mishawaka Police Department established a cold case team in January 2022, consisting of former South Bend homicide detectives. This team worked very hard to locate further witnesses and gather evidence to back up the initial witness statement. However, upon closer inspection, they learned that the third suspect died in 2018. The fact that three men were implicated in Shelley and Warner's kidnapping and murder was a significant revelation. It demonstrated the importance of a witness' bravery in coming forward almost 40 years after the horrific event. The witness was motivated by the fact that two of the suspects had died and the third had disappeared. The fear and intimidation these suspects had used over the years to conceal crucial information added to the anguish of Shelley's family and the neighborhood. Cold case investigator Jim Campbell discussed the difficulties witnesses faced and how family intimidation had suppressed their testimony. Despite the fact that the three suspects' involvement was clearly shown by the investigators' testimony and evidence, there was a significant issue that was unavoidable. Since all three suspects had already passed away, how could the investigators carry out their investigation and provide Shelley's family with closure and justice? The St. Joseph County Prosecutor's Office reviewed the evidence and declared it conclusive, closing the case. It did not take long to realize that the dead could not face legal repercussions. Aside from their age and acquaintance with Shelley, not much information was available regarding the suspects. However, the St. Joseph County Prosecutor's Office ruling provided resolution. Though the suspects were deceased, there was optimism that the truth would come to light and Shelley's family could finally rest in peace. The witness's vital knowledge set off a coincidental chain of events that resulted in additional witnesses and evidence. The St. Joseph County Prosecutor's Office stated that although DNA testing was unable to produce a conclusive match, other evidence and statements were vital. Unfortunately, because of their demise, the suspects' identities remain a mystery, making it impossible to press charges. Ultimately, individuals dedicated to attaining justice had not allowed the passing of time to erode their determination. The murder of Shelley Ann Warner had been solved because of the investigators' perseverance and the bravery of a witness who stepped forward to reveal a terrible chapter in Mishawaka's past. The verdict in the Shelley Ann Warner case caused a spectrum of feelings in those who were directly engaged. The investigators who had toiled for years to sit with Lee in order to find the truth found some solace in the case's ending. Tim Corbett, one of the cold case investigators, remarked, "I hope she's sitting next to God. I am grateful to the police, the public, and all those who assisted with the case." Even still, there remained a persistent sense of sadness until the case's end. Family members of Shelley remained silent about the updates since they were understandably private in their loss. What are your thoughts on this case? Do you believe that justice has actually been done? Share your opinions with us in the comments section. Moving on to the next case. Henry Kendall Thor. Henry Kendall, born in 1871 in Pennsylvania. Thor was the heir apparent to a multi-million-dollar fortune and the son of railroad and coal baron William Thor Sr. even as a young child. Thor was well known for being unpredictable, exhibiting signs of sleeplessness, nonsensical speech, and tantrums. He was labeled as a troublemaker and dumb by teachers while attending different private schools. In the end, he enrolled at the University of Pittsburgh before moving to Harvard. However, he was expelled afterwards. He didn't spend much time studying in college, choosing instead to indulge in drinking binges and cockfights. Once, despite being on a $2,500 monthly allowance at a period when the average annual pay was about $500, he chased down a cab driver with a shotgun because he felt the man had defrauded him of $10. He was called a playboy and would frequently light cigarettes with $100 bills. After being expelled from Harvard, Thor was shunned by elites in New York City. He held Stanford White, a well-known architect, responsible for this, claiming that he opposed Thor's admittance into these exclusive circles. That is, until he saw model Florence Evelyn Nesbit, and his fixation with White only intensified. White and Evelyn have been friends since Evelyn was 15, and when she was about 16, he had raped her while she was asleep, loading her down with alcohol. Thor was an older, extremely affluent man who greatly pleased Evelyn's mother and headmistress. He would always come to her with presents, cash, and words of appreciation. Eventually, they would travel to Europe together, where he proposed to Evelyn. She refused at first as she knew Thor was fixated on female virginity, but she later told him the truth about what had transpired with White, which infuriated him. Since Evelyn was no longer a virgin, he believed that White had destroyed Evelyn. 1905 saw the couple's marriage. Evelyn and Thor, together with a few others, traveled to Madison Square Garden on June 25, 1906, for a show that ended at approximately 11 o'clock at night. White now emerged and sat down at one of the surrounding tables. During the show's finale, Thor, who had been furious all day, approached White and produced a gun. He shot White 3 times from 2 feet away. He didn't try to get away from the scene or take credit for the architect's death. Instead, he stood over his corpse afterwards, saying, "I did it because he ruined my wife," instead. Nevertheless, other witnesses assert that he might have spoken life instead of wife. He had it coming to him, he continued. After taking advantage of the girl, he left her behind. Thor was refused bail after being accused of first-degree murder. He slept on a brass bed rather than a regular prison cot, had his meals made by his favorite restaurants while he was incarcerated awaiting trial, dressed in custom clothing rather than the prison uniform, and was permitted to drink champagne and wine. In the days after the murder, he was said to have been overjoyed, and he later claimed to have heard the voices of young girls in heaven calling out to him. This, he believed, was a sign of heavenly blessing. Thor's mother, who had been defending the family reputation for years by settling lawsuits brought by her son, hired the top defense attorney available, which would have cost the family $750,000 in today's currency. When Mrs. Thor's lawyers thought that would be the best defense, they first insisted that her son not be stigmatized by clinical lunacy. Thus, the two came to an agreement whereby Thor would claim temporary insanity. It's been said that Miss Thor's son inherited her family's history of mental illness. He had physically and sexually abused Evelyn throughout the years, had a tendency to seduce victims into a place where he could restrain and physically abuse them. His sexual desires have been described as sadistic. Tens of thousands of dollars had been used to buy the silence of the victims. Thor's first trial ended with a deadlocked jury. January 1908 saw the start of his second trial, which continued until February 1st, when he was judged not guilty by reason of insanity and given a life sentence in the Fishkill, New York-based Mattawan State Hospital for the criminally insane. Despite the fact that his exceptional riches gave him access to benefits that regular patients could not. After being placed there, his legal team worked to have him declared sane. In 1915, a trial was held to ascertain his sanity, and he was declared sane and allowed to return to society. Thor was accused of kidnapping, beating, and sexually abusing Frederick Gump, a 19-year-old, just a year later. Thor tried to kill himself after bribing the Gump family and left Philadelphia. After being committed to a mental hospital once more, he was eventually found to be sane once more and was freed in 1924. In 1947, Thor passed away in Miami, Florida from a heart attack. His age was 76. He was buried in Pittsburgh and left Evelyn the modern equivalent of about $121,000 of his $12 million wealth. Moving on to the next case. Suzanne Morphew. In 2020, 49-year-old Suzanne Morphew, her husband Barry Morphew, and their 2 daughters, Macy and Mallory, resided in Colorado. Suzanne rode her bike near Maysville, Colorado, on May 10th. Her neighbor reported her missing to the police when she failed to return home. Her bike was the only item discovered in the forested region where Suzanne had gone bicycling, but she was nowhere to be seen. Shortly after her disappearance on May 17th, Barry made a heartfelt plea on Facebook, promising to do everything it takes to get her back. "Oh, Suzanne, please, if someone hears this and knows that you are out there, let us know, and we will do everything in our power to get you back. Your girls need you, and we love and miss you." Not a single question was raised. "I'll do whatever it takes to get you back, no matter how much they demanded. I adore you, honey. I really want you back." The investigation was worked on by more than 70 investigators from several agencies. They followed up on over 1,400 tips, conducted over 400 interviews, and executed 135 search warrants. He was also charged with tampering with evidence and attempting to influence a public official, even though the case had gone cold at one time. Barry is being held without bond at the Chaffee County Detention Facility. Though her body has not yet been located, Chaffee County Sheriff Jones Beasley claims they have sufficient evidence that Barry killed his wife. Unfortunately, authorities are unable to provide a reason for Barry's crime or explain what led them to charge him. John said, "Today is not a day to celebrate, nor does it signal the conclusion of this investigation. Instead, it's the next phase of our extremely challenging but crucial quest for justice for Suzanne and her family." He expressed gratitude to Linda Stanley, the 11th Judicial District Attorney, the FBI, and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation for their contributions to cracking the case. Suzanne's sister expressed her gratitude to the police and thanked them. "For my sister, justice is finally starting today. It has been a journey no one ever thought they would undertake. We do know, for example, that on the day his wife vanished, Barry was staying at a hotel in Broomfield, Colorado. He smelled of chlorine and was drenched from damp towels when he mysteriously exited the room. Barry made nearly $1 million when he sold the house he shared with Suzanne. He purchased a 2-acre property in Salida, Colorado, a few weeks after Suzanne vanished, and he sold it in February 2021. The site was searched in November 2020 after Andrew, Suzanne's brother, paid $18,000 for the search. When cadaver dogs were employed, they were able to detect the smell of human remains. Linda Stanley, the district attorney, was also instrumental in advancing the case to its current state. She said something like this: "This day is dedicated to Suzanne, her family, and everyone who had the pleasure of getting to know, love, and care for her. These are the only information that have been made public thus far. However, it appears that the perpetrator is currently in jail." Thomas Gilbert. On January 4th, 2015, New York's elite society was taken aback by 911 calls. Wall Street hedge fund manager Thomas Gilbert, 70, was shot and killed in his own home. The fact that his own son, Thomas Tommy Gilbert Jr., 31, killed him rather than some random invader made the case even more horrifying. Tommy's mother, Shelley, discovered her husband bleeding out from a gunshot wound to the head. That was all that remained. How could this have happened? Did the father and son have a strained relationship, or was there a deeper reason behind this? After 2 exhausting rounds of tennis at the River Club, Thomas Gilbert was unwinding at his East Side Manhattan home just 3 days after New Year's Day 2015. His 65-year-old wife Shelley was using her laptop to communicate with pals while he was unwinding in his bedroom and watching a football game. Around 3:15 p.m., the front doorbell went off. Shelley was shocked to see her son had dropped by unexpectedly when she answered the door. Tommy stood there with a duffel bag in his hand and a hoodie on after 5 months without speaking. It should be noted that Tommy's relationship with his father had not always been harmonious. Tommy had no desire to take over the family business, despite his father's wishes. But when Shelley finally saw him that day, she was filled with joy and optimism that their long-standing disagreement may be resolved. Tommy informed his mother that he wanted to meet his father so they could discuss business, and she wishes he had been there for that alone. Tommy asked Shelley if his younger sister Bess was home as he was strolling into the apartment, but she told him she was at church. Tommy went on to say that he was hungry and asked his mother to get him a sandwich and a Coke from the supermarket. In order for him to have ample time alone with his father, he asked her to return in an hour. Shelley offered to make the sandwich alone because she wasn't sure she should leave them together, but Tommy insisted she had to leave. Shelley sensed something wasn't right with her son as she was tying her shoes for her evening out. But in the end, she made the decision to go. But soon after leaving the apartment, she couldn't get rid of the uneasy sensation. So Shelley went back to her apartment building and rode the elevator to the 8th story to make sure everything was all right rather than going to the store. But by the time she came back, Tommy had vanished, leaving a terrifying scene in his wake. Thomas Gilbert, her spouse, had been fatally shot by gunfire. His head was bleeding profusely, and he was holding a 40mm Glock against his chest with his left hand. The 911 call that explained Tommy's actions did not necessitate a thorough investigation to identify a suspect, but the police still sought some proof to establish Tommy's guilt. The police learned that Tommy was a Princeton graduate who had never been able to secure steady work from Shelley's claims. Tommy had experienced an opulent life as a pampered son. His preference was more for clubbing and surfing than he was for inheriting and running his father's company. His father reduced his weekly allowance from $1,000 to $300 just hours before the murder in an effort to instill some independence in his son. This fact showed up as a potential reason why he would kill his father. Tommy had been dealing with mental health issues, and Shelley informed the police that he might not have considered the repercussions of his actions. Tommy showed symptoms of obsessive-compulsive disorder as a teenager. Doctors later believed he might have been schizophrenia, but he refused assistance, frequently ignoring family texts and phone calls. But Shelley's declaration alone was insufficient to shield her son. The New York Police Department launched a manhunt almost once, and 6 hours after Tommy's death, police were able to locate his Chelsea apartment using his cell phone. Tommy astonished them by knocking on his door and being so nonchalant about it. In addition, he informed the police that he was speaking with his lawyer on the phone when they came. Following his arrest, Tommy faced charges of murder and unlawful possession of a weapon. Detectives interviewed Tommy's relatives and acquaintances and learned that he was accused of setting a fire at a home owned by prominent banker Peter Smith Sr. in the Hamptons back in 2014. There were no accusations made against Tommy. Tommy and Peter Smith Jr., the owner's son, were friends before they fell out. Investigators also learned that Tommy had purchased his own firearm online a few months before to the murder and had to drive all the way to Ohio with it because it was against the law to mail it. In the months preceding his father's death, the authorities also examined his computer and discovered that he had been looking for websites such as .com and .com. Based on the available information, Tommy appeared to be experiencing symptoms of a mental illness. But his day was not going to get better. A person must comprehend the charges against them, be competent to participate in their own defense, and understand how the court system operates in order to be deemed legally capable. It is possible to find someone competent to stand trial even if they suffer from a severe mental disease. And Tommy experienced precisely that. Tommy's defense team said that his mental state was deteriorating while he was being held in detention and that he was unable to stand trial. Tommy developed depression, psychosis, paranoid illness, and schizophrenia, according to the testimony of 3 doctors and a psychologist who were called to testify. The defense experts added that he harbored hostile thoughts toward his father as a result of his delusions. Nevertheless, the trial started in 2019 after the prosecution also engaged a medical expert who deemed the defendant fit to stand trial. Shelley Gilbert, the son's mother, testified in court that her son had not acted out of retaliation or money grubbing, but rather that he had become so mentally ill that he was unable to comprehend that what he had done when he shot his father was wrong or illegal. Mr. Craig Ortner, the chief prosecutor, refuted the statement. He added that when Tommy placed the gun in his father's hand to give the impression that he had committed suicide, he was completely aware of the circumstances. Tommy also demonstrated how well he grasped the repercussions of his actions by calling his attorney before the cops had located him. Shelley implored the magistrate to commit her son to a mental health institution. She informed them that his father would have also desired for him to be given another chance, but that was not going to occur. For 5 weeks, Mr. Orner painted Tommy as a resentful son who went to Ohio to purchase a pistol he saw on Facebook and allegedly planned to kill his father. Tommy's claim of insanity was rejected, and on June 28, 2019, he was convicted guilty of second-degree murder and 2 counts of possessing weapons. And on September 27, 2019, 2 months later, he received a sentence that carried a maximum of 30 years to life in jail. He'll be 65 years old when he becomes eligible for parole. Moving on to the next case. Sophie Toussaint Duplantier, Paris, France was home to 39-year-old documentary producer Sophie Toussaint Duplantier. She captivated everyone she came into contact with her intelligence and beauty. Her complexion was as pale as porcelain, yet her hair was a fiery gold. Her radiant grin shone under the lights of the events she attended, and the numerous paparazzi cameras that bordered the premieres and high society parties she was invited to immortalize her breathtaking image. When Sophie first met Daniel Toussaint Duplantier, she was raising her kid from a previous marriage alone. In the French film industry, Daniel was a well-known and renowned film producer. In 1988, Sophie and him were romantically involved after meeting at work. Although Daniel and Sophie had already been married twice and were 16 years apart, they connected intellectually and shared similar passions and interests in work. On June 18, 1991, Daniel and Sophie were married. Whereas Sophie desired a much simpler and more secluded life, Daniel led a life full with premieres and parties. Sophie fell in love with Ireland's scenery during her multiple visits there as a teenager. To get away from her hectic socialite life, Sophie purchased a vacation property in Shoal, Ireland, in 1993, close to Tormore, West Cork. She selected a rather remote house. On windy days, its windows and doors rattled, and it lacked light and heating. She would frequently spend the holidays with her kid at this remote house. Sophie made the decision to take a vacation by plane to Ireland on December 19, 1996. She requested a few friends and family members to go with her, but as Christmas was quickly approaching, nobody was available, so she made the decision to travel alone. On December 20th, 1996, she landed in Ireland early and leased a Ford Fiesta to go to her vacation house in Tumor, West Cork. She intended to spend a few days there before spending Christmas in Paris. She made a stop at a Texaco gas station en route to her residence in order to get wood for starting a fire. After that, she went to Scholl's Courtyard Bar and had lunch there between 3:30 and 4 p.m., after which she drove home. She called the housekeeper as soon as she got there to speak with her. She brought goods into town the following day and took out cash from the ATM. About 4:30 p.m., she made her way back to her home. When last seen, she was outside her residence. She is thought to have spent the rest of the day at the house. She tried to reach Daniel in France later that night, but he did not answer. But he gave her a call back at about 11 at night. Daniel reported that their chat was fairly amicable and that Sophie appeared to be unfazed. On December 22nd, the next day, she went to the Dunlow ruins at Three Castles Head. She went to see a friend later that day and told her about the woman she had seen at the ruins, who had really startled her. Sophie had stated, "Oh my God, I saw a woman like a white shape," according to her acquaintance. The people in the area think Sophie had seen the Lady of the Lake. The Lady of the Lake is an urban legend that claims to be a ghost that haunts the castle ruins and that seeing her will cause death in a matter of hours. On December 23, 1996, at approximately 10 in the morning, Sophie's corpse would be discovered in the laneway next to her vacation house. Shirley Foster, a neighbor, made the discovery of her. Sophie was discovered with her boots, lycra leggings, and white top on. Her clothing became entangled in the barbed wire encircling her residence. Her murder had been terrible. Her hands and arms were covered in several defensive wounds. She had likely been struck with a fire poker, as she had sustained significant injuries to her head and upper chest. She had sustained serious facial and head injuries. Sophie was found lying on the ground, and a concrete block that looked like it had been dropped on her head was discovered at the murder site. Her body was surrounded by a pool of blood, and the middle gate nearby had bloodstains on it. Police entered the house and discovered it to be unaltered. There was not the slightest indication of a break-in. It appeared that someone had visited Sophie that evening because her bed was not made and 2 wine glasses were left to dry on the draining board next to the kitchen sink. An expert in fingerprints attempted to remove fingerprints from wine glasses and other household items, but the attempt was unsuccessful. Other than Sophie's fingerprint, the expert was unable to locate any others. Between Sophie's fingernails, there were hair strands stained with blood. Nonetheless, forensic examination identified the blood and hair as belonging to Sophie. Oddly, not a single bit of DNA evidence was discovered by the police at the crime scene. The house's front and rear doors were latching and closed when the police arrived. The laneway's massive gate was ajar, despite the fact that the neighbors claimed Sophie typically kept it locked. According to the police, Sophie was attacked inside her house, but she managed to flee and make her way outdoors, where she attempted to scale a fence but got tangled in the barbed wire. This allowed her assassin enough time to track her down and execute her with brutality. Since Sophie's body was discovered close to Briar's, authorities think the murderer may have suffered injuries and may have had markings or scratches on his hands and face. Over the following few days, police conducted questionnaires about the murder and conducted door-to-door interviews with residents. Over the course of the inquiry, 50 suspects would be eliminated in total. A local business owner named Marie Farrell reported to the police on December 27, 1996, that she had seen Sophie in her store on December 21st, sometime about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Marie reported seeing a man with an extremely long black coat standing outside her store. She claimed that the man followed Sophie out of the store. A lady calling police under the alias Fiona made contact with them on January 11, 1997. She informed them that the night Sophie was killed, at around 3 in the morning, she had spotted a man by Kelfala Bridge. Sophie's house is only 2.6 kilometers away from Kelfala Bridge. The woman ended the call without providing any more details. The call was traced to a public phone booth by the police. Fiona was asked to get in touch with the police on January 20th in order to provide them with any information on the individual she had seen near Kelfala Bridge. Fiona reported her sighting to the police over the phone the next day. Once more, the call was made from a payphone. Fiona called the police again on January 24th, this time letting them know that she was unable to meet with them to discuss the sighting. However, when authorities followed the call this time, they discovered that Marie Farrell's house was the source. Marie Farrell, the proprietor of the shop, who had reported seeing a man in a long black coat pursuing Sophie, was Fiona. She explained to police that she didn't want to make a public statement because the night she saw the man on the bridge, she was with another man, and she didn't want her husband to find out. She added that there was a man on the bridge who was swinging his arms wildly and looked to be intoxicated. Afterwards, she claimed to have seen the man once more in January at a nearby store, and she had identified him to the police. They found out that Ian Bailey was the man she had indicated. Journalist Ian Bailey resides in Shoal, Ireland. He relocated to Shoal in 1991 from Manchester, England, where he had been born and raised. Bailey met Welsh artist Jules Thomas while working as a freelance journalist. Bailey moved into Liskia, Shoal, to live with Jules. Bailey allegedly had a history of abusing Jules at home, and in 2001, he was found guilty of assault. The first journalist to arrive at Sophie's crime scene was Bailey. At 1:40 p.m., Bailey received a call concerning the murder of a foreign nationalist from Eddie Cassidy, a reporter for the Irish Examiner. Despite the fact that there were a lot of foreign nationalists residing in West Cork at the time, it is said that Bailey and Jules went directly to the location of the crime. A witness claims that Bailey had informed them, at approximately 11:45 p.m. that day, that he was covering a French woman's murder. Later, when questioned about how he knew the victim was French at the time, neither the police nor the media were aware of this. Barley replied that Eddie Cassidy had informed him that the victim was a French woman. When questioned, Eddie Cassidy said that he had merely informed him that the deceased was a foreign nationalist and that he was unaware of the victim's nationality at the time. Bailey wrote several stories about the case in the days that followed. He said in the papers that the woman had several male partners in France and that it was probable that one of them had killed her. He also revealed facts about the crime scene that the general public was unaware of. It seems as though he directed the inquiry from West Cork to France. Furthermore, in the days following the murder, a number of witnesses claimed to have seen Bailey with numerous scratches on his arms. Bailey claimed that he had cut down a Christmas tree, which is what caused the scratches. He claimed to have gotten up to the top of a pine tree, saw the top fall off, and scratched his arms trying to bring it down the tree. In addition, Bailey claimed to have acquired a scratch on his forehead while murdering 3 turkeys. Bailey and Jules were taken into custody on February 10th in connection with Sophie Toussaint Duplantier's murder. When asked where he had been, he told police that the previous evening he had gone to a nearby pub with Jules and had arrived home at around 12:30 in the morning. After that, he said, he went to bed and slept till the next morning. At first, Jules confirmed his account. Jules later claimed, though, that Bailey might have gotten out of bed an hour or so later. When Jules visited him again at 9 in the morning, she reported that he had a new scratch on his forehead. Bailey then asserted that he had gotten out of bed, but it was only at 4 in the morning, and that he had spent 30 minutes writing an article before going back to sleep. Afterwards, Bailey and Jules were freed from custody with no charges. Later on, several people would come forward to claim that Bailey had admitted to killing Sophie. On February 4th, Malachi Reed, a youngster, reported to the police that Bailey had claimed to have killed Sophie, stating that he had, quote, gone up there with a rock and bashed her effing brains out, while giving him a lift home. When Bailey admitted to killing Sophie in 1998 while out drinking with Richie and Rosie Shelley, he said, I did it. I completed it. I overreached myself. Bailey was detained once more in 1998 in connection with Sophie's murder, but this time he was not prosecuted. Marie Farrell testified for the newspapers in a 2003 libel trial, proving that Bailey was the man she saw on the bridge. Following that, Marie claimed Bailey harassed her, and in 2004 Bailey threatened to take Marie to court if she did not take back her statement. Retraction of the statement and admission of coercion by the police to misidentify Bailey as the man she saw on the Kayafata Bridge were the highlights of Marie's 2005 statement. Bailey's arrest warrant was issued in 2010 by a French magistrate. However, in 2012 and again in 2017, the Irish Supreme Court rejected his request for extradition. A French court tried Bailey absentee in 2019. On May 31st, 2019, Bailey was found guilty of murder and given a 25-year prison term. Bailey has not been charged in Ireland with Sophie's murder despite multiple arrests because there is insufficient evidence connecting him to the crime. Bailey still maintains his innocence and resides in West Cork. The case is still open. Moving on to the next case. James Joseph Richardson. Farm laborer James Joseph Richardson was employed in the small southern Florida hamlet of Arcadia, where he cared for an orange plantation. Together with his wife, Annie Mae Richardson, he had 5 children. The 7 children, ages 2 to 8, were raised by Annie and her 2 children from her previous marriage. Bessie Rees, a neighbor, watched the kids while James and Annie worked because they were both full-time employees. The 3 youngest children remained with Bessie on October 25, 1967, while the 4 older children went to school. The 4 kids came home from school at lunchtime to join Bessie and their siblings for lunch. Their mother had made them a breakfast of rice and beans early that morning. Teachers at the school saw that the children were exhibiting odd symptoms, and the administrator rushed them to the hospital right away. When one of the instructors went and checked on the 3 kids at home, she discovered that they were also sick, and they were sent to the hospital. Only one of James and Annie's children was sick, and a parent needed to accompany them to the hospital, they were informed. 6 of the 7 children had passed away by the time they got to the hospital. Next day, the 7th child would pass away. It was thought that the poisoning caused the deaths of all the youngsters. The Richardson residence was promptly examined by the authorities in an effort to find any evidence connected to the children's deaths. The police conducted extensive searching, but they were unable to uncover anything that would have suggested a poison, with the exception of an insect spray, which they did not think was the source of the kids' poisoning. The following day, Bessie called the police to report that her neighbor Charlie Smith had found a bag of the pesticide parathion in a shed. The cops concurred that after 5 searches of the property the day before, the parathion bag had not been found. They reasoned that the individual who had poisoned the kids was most likely the same one who had hidden the parathion sack. Tests conducted later on the kids' lunch plates and other cooking utensils showed that there was enough parathion in them to kill a whole city's worth of people. James was charged with 7 first-degree murder counts by investigator Klein 2 days after the children's funeral. Bessie was not looked into as a suspect, even though she was the last to handle the plates and food before the kids ate it. Some thought Klein was just trying to get noticed by the police department by seeking for a big break. Although it was never established, Klein claimed throughout the trial that James had 5 other children who had passed away in another Florida city under suspicious circumstances, and that his goal in committing this murder was to get the insurance money for the deceased children. The judge presented evidence of lie detector tests that both Annie Mae and James had taken, indicating that James was aware of the poisoning. After expressing interest in Richardson's case, John Robinson of Daytona Beach and his associate decided to provide pro bono legal representation to the lawyerless Richardson. Because the judge insisted that Richardson was guilty all the time, John thought the case was being handled unfairly. James told John that when he was being held at the county prison, Officer Klein had called him names and advised him to enter a guilty plea in order to receive a less term. Following the discovery of no evidence suggesting James' guilt, John was able to reduce James' bail from $100,000 to $75,100. James was given a bail and let free. However, not long after James was freed, an inmate who was being prosecuted for a crime said that James had told him in the county jail that he had killed the kids. James's bail was revoked, and 2 other inmates who were being prosecuted soon after declared that James had also confessed to them. John tried to get the trial moved to a different, more equitable county, but James was detained once more and his trial was shifted to a different county. 2 of the jailhouse informants testified throughout the trial regarding what James reportedly told them. Because of their testimony, the sentences of the 2 informants were shortened. The jury was read the statement of the 3rd informant, who had been shot dead before the trial. After less than 2 hours of deliberation on May 31st, 1968, James was found guilty and given a death sentence in Florida's electric chair. Before the U.S. Supreme Court declared in 1972 that the capital penalty in the U.S. at the time was unconstitutional, James spent over 5 years on death row. In 1993, he was sentenced to life in jail with the possibility of release. James's solicitors were successful in getting him a fresh trial in 1988. Bessie Rees allegedly confessed to the murders 100 times while residing in an assisted living facility. But because of her mental health issues, no one ever took her seriously, according to the attorneys. Bessie Rees was discovered to be a convicted killer as well. At the time of the children's killings, she was on parole and had reportedly used poison to kill her ex-husband. There was proof of a cover-up by the local judge, State Attorney Frank Schwab, and Sheriff Frank Klein, which they all denied. In addition, the lone surviving jailhouse informant changed his narrative, claiming he was given a reduced term in exchange for his testimony. James was released from prison on April 25, 1989, after a judge overturned his conviction on the grounds that the evidence had been withheld, preventing him from providing a fair trial. Bessie passed away from Alzheimer's in 1992 without facing any legal repercussions for the incident. James later sued DeSoto County for false convictions, and the case was settled for $150,000. Governor Rick Scott of Florida enacted a bill in June 2014 allowing James to receive compensation for his unjust conviction of more than $1 million. Moving on to the next case. Erica Green. Police were looking for an elderly man who had been reported missing by his buddy on the evening of April 28, 2001, in the woodland area of Hibbs Park. 59th Street near Kensington Avenue, Kansas City, Missouri. However, they were unable to locate the man and instead came upon the horrifying discovery of a toddler's headless body in the woods. A plastic bag containing the missing child's hat was discovered on May 1st, 2001, approximately 200 yards away from the location of her severed head. Nobody had filed a missing child report, and the youngster's head had become unrecognizable. Precious Doe was the name the police gave her because they didn't know who she was. There are still a lot of uncertainties about this revelation. Who was this young person? Why had her death been handled so gruesomely? So let's go right into this mystery without further ado. Kansas City, Missouri, is renowned for its expansive grasslands, undulating hills, and breathtaking scenery. Numerous cultural attractions, such as museums and art galleries, are abundant in Kansas. With more than 20 official wildflower trails spread over the state's rural and urban areas, it is aptly known as the Sunflower State. One of the cities in America with a high crime rate is Kansas City, which has a population of over 500,000 and a high violent crime rate of 57 per 1,000 persons. And this city is where our narrative starts. In order to pick up Erica for a family gathering, Michelle and Harold returned to Betty's residence on April 4th, 2001. Easter was quickly approaching, so Betty prepared Erica to spend the holiday with her and was hesitant to let go of the little girl because of how much she loved her. But since Michelle was the biological mother, Betty was at a loss for options. Betty packed up Erica's belongings, which included her new outfits that she bought for Easter and her favorite doll. Unaware that it would be her last encounter with Erica, she said goodbye to her. It is likely that Harold and Michelle decided to bring the youngest of their children to Kansas City, Missouri, because Harold had children of his own before they met. Harold abducted Marquisha Johnson, his 6-month-old child. For various circumstances, they did not move to Kansas City with all of their kids. First, LaWanda Driscoll, Harold's cousin, owned the flat in Kansas. Second, Michelle had already moved her other 4 children to another location. After a few weeks, Harold's cousin LaWanda Driscoll realized that Erica had vanished from her life. Inquiring about Erica's whereabouts, Michelle informed LaWanda that Betty Brown had traveled from Oklahoma to pick Erica up. An unidentified individual called the police on the evening of April 28, 2001, claiming to have been attempting to contact his friend for some time, but not being able to. He requested assistance from the police in doing a welfare check on his friend, which the officers provided. However, after failing to locate the man at his home, they were forced to search the forested area close to Hibbs Park, located at 59th Street and Kensington Avenue in Kansas City, Missouri. The police received a call informing them that the individual they were seeking for had been located after some time of searching. But just as they were ready to depart, they came upon a horrifying scene. It was a toddler's severed body. The body was found naked. Therefore, the authorities quickly concluded that it belonged to a female toddler. The discovery was viewed suspiciously by the police right away. They questioned why the body of a toddler would be found in the woods and why no one had gone missing in the vicinity of the youngster of that age. The investigators encountered an impasse. There was absolutely no way the investigation could proceed without the head of the body. They were only able to ascertain the child's age and gender. They discovered that the dead body belonged to a black girl who was probably between 3 and 6 years old, and that she had suffered abuse prior to her murder. About 200 yards from where the child's body was recovered, on May 1st, 2001, 3 days after it was discovered, a volunteer searcher discovered the child's head wrapped in a plastic bag. An ashtray that the police thought to be the murder weapon was found next to the body. However, the head was so badly decayed that the authorities were unable to identify the owner of the body even after it was discovered. The victim's age and the brutality of the murder quickly brought the case to the attention of the country. The investigators kept looking, hoping that the child's parent or guardian would show up to claim her body, but they got no response. The victim was given the nickname Precious Doe when it was determined who they were. Before long, a large number of people offered their time to help publicize Precious Doe by distributing leaflets, asking inquiries at door, and using radio, television, and newspapers to uncover further information about the victim's identity. The case was frequently highlighted on cold case files and America's Most Wanted lists in an attempt to identify the young child. However, despite everything, no one claimed the infant and no witnesses came forward. Public donations helped fund Precious Doe's funeral, which took place in December 2001 at Hibbs Park, not far from where her body was discovered. There were hundreds of individuals present, and the locals turned out in large numbers. But despite all the attention the case received, nobody knew for sure who Precious Doe was. To do an autopsy, the police dug up Precious Doe's remains in 2002, and the outcome demonstrates that, before to her murder, she had been severely beaten with an ashtray and mistreated. Nothing was discovered in the ashtray when police examined it for fingerprints and DNA. Researchers examined Precious Doe's skull in July 2003 and also constructed a bust depicting her possible appearance. The case was so well known that the authorities were inundated with tips, some from close friends and family and others from a great distance. The police were called about the case by Jamaica at one point, but they discovered it had nothing to do with Precious Doe's identification. Soon, the public lost hope as the police were preoccupied with other cases. However, Alonzo Washington, a strong advocate for Precious Doe's case, never gave up on finding the truth. Every year, Alonzo placed advertisements regarding the case in a local newspaper. Because the victim was a Black American, Alonzo had the idea to publish the advertisement in an African American newspaper during Precious Doe's 4th-year commemoration in April 2005. He also designed t-shirts featuring a bust image of Precious Doe, and that turned into the pivotal moment the case required. A man calling Alonzo on April 30th, 2005 said his name was Thurman McIntosh. This man turned out to be Harold Johnson's father. Alonzo, assuming he was an expert on the Precious Doe case, paid attention to Thurman's 81-year-old statement asserting that Erica Green was Precious Doe. In addition, he stated that Erica Green was slain by his son Harold Johnson. Thurman was asked by Alonzo why he hadn't revealed the information since 2001 and had only done it in 2005. Thurman said that every time he called the police to provide information about the case, they fired him. Then Thurman was pushed by Alonzo to obtain him a photo of Erica and a lock of Michelle's hair. As soon as Thurman sent Alonzo a hair sample, he forwarded it to Detective David Bernard, who was in charge of the case involving the prize doe. Thurman was hauled in to be questioned on May 4th, 2005. There, he explained to the investigators his conviction that his son was the one who had done it. After Erica vanished from Thurman's sight, he asked Harold and Michelle where she was, to which they both replied that she was in Oklahoma with Betty. Suddenly, Thurman claimed he felt Precious Doe was actually Erica Green while the couple and Markeisha were returning to Oklahoma. When Thurman confronted Harold and revealed to him that he had killed Erica, Harold said it was an error. Thurman claimed he wanted to reveal Precious Doe's final fate to the world as soon as he found out the truth. Thurman sent over a photo of one of Erica's cousins, but the hair exactly matched Precious Doe's. Precious Doe was finally able to be identified by the police as Erica Green. On May 15, 1997, Erica Green was born in McLeod, Oklahoma, in the United States. She was the youngest of 5 children born to her father, Larry Green, and mother, Michelle Johnson. Michelle was found guilty of stealing goods from a store when she was 8 months pregnant. The Oklahoma Department of Corrections sentenced her to 2 years in prison, but due of her pregnancy, she was kept at the Mabel Bassett Correctional Center. When Michelle went into labor, she had only completed 1 month of her sentence. After being brought to Oklahoma City's OU Medical Center, she gave birth to Erica Green there. She was urged to get in touch with a guardian who would help her hold Erica until she was released because she was unable to care for Erica. In order to find a guardian for their child, Erica's father, Larry Green, was approached by Michelle. Then Larry would give a call to Betty Brown, a friend of Larry's mother who was in her late 60s. When Betty arrived at the prison, she was given several tasks to complete in order to be granted custody of Erica. To determine if Betty was qualified to have care of the child, the authorities at the correctional facility did not run a background investigation. All she had to offer was her driver's license and a Sam's Club card. A paperwork needed to be signed by her. On May 16, 1997, after this was completed, Betty was given custody of Erica Green. Betty characterized Erica as one of the most independent children she had ever encountered, and she loved and cared for her as if she were her own. She added that Erica was a beautiful girl with a constant smile. People adored her whenever she brought Erica along to church. On October 23, 1997, Michelle was then granted a probationary release. Michelle only occasionally went to see Betty Brown to see how her child was doing, which suggested to Betty that she wasn't all that concerned in looking after Erica. By the time Erica turned 3 years old in 2000, Michelle had moved on to Harold Johnson, her future husband, whom she married in 2002. Harold Johnson invited Michelle to live with him soon after at his Oklahoma home. Following confirmation that Erica's body belonged to her, the police searched for her mother Michelle and her partner Harold. Harold and Michelle were at the Muskogee County Jail in Oklahoma after being detained on several warrants. The police did not hesitate to act. They went straight to the facility to question Harold Johnson and Michelle. The first person to be questioned was Michelle. Michelle recognized her daughter Erica from the photo the police showed her during the interrogation, and she also pinned a note on the reverse. "I'm sorry, Mama," she wrote. "My heart and soul will always be with you. I'll always love you, Tiny E." She consented to tell the police how the murder occurred after completing that. Michelle claims that after the family got home in the evening of April 2001 at around 8 o'clock, Harold quickly started to get drunk and high on PCP. While Michelle went to the loo, she gave the order for Erica, who shared a room with Harold, to go to bed. Harold started complaining about Erica being naughty before she even finished her shower because she wouldn't go to bed. Harold got upset after telling Erica to go to bed 5 or 6 times. Erica was already out of bed when Michelle emerged from the loo. Then she told Erica to get back in bed, but Erica didn't move. Harold kicked Erica till she passed out at that moment. Michelle claimed that even though she hurried to get Erica and put her in a chilly water, Erica refused to awaken. Michelle realized then that something grave had occurred. After roughly 15 minutes, Erica was still asleep and unresponsive when Michelle carried her to the toilet and lay her on the floor. At that moment, Erica was in need of medical attention, but Harold and Michelle chose not to seek it because they still had outstanding warrants. Even though Michelle realized Erica could not survive, she agreed not to call for help because she didn't want to go to jail. Erica remained unconscious for 10 to 14 hours, and she had passed away by the next morning. Harold and Michelle concealed Erica's body in a pram after she passed away. Michelle claims that because they were both terrified and unsure of what to do, they ultimately decided to dispose of the body. They both took Erica's body outside through the house window and headed directly into the woods, waiting for darkness to ensure they were unobserved. Harold considered using edge clippers to remove the head and disfigure it in order to make identification difficult, since he worried that keeping the body as it was may eventually lead the police to their home. The head was wrapped in plastic bags before being thrown in a skip at a local church. However, Michelle didn't think that was a smart idea. Harold was instructed to remove the head by her, since the smell could alert the church's owners. Harold threw the head in Hibbs Park's forested section, following his wife's advice. After removing Erica's clothing from her body and giving them to Michelle, Harold left her body in the woods. The two of them went back to their house and entered the room by the same exit. LaWanda Driscoll would soon discover Erica was missing, even if no one witnessed what they did. Michelle lied to Mom when she was asked where she was, saying she was lying in the room because she was sick. Michelle wanted the cops to take her to meet Harold after giving her version of events. She encouraged Harold to confess to his crimes, telling him that she had already done so. Michelle was first outraged with Harold and pleaded with her to retract her testimony, but she had already made up her mind to testify against him in court. Harold afterwards consented to give an oral testimony in which he detailed the manner in which he killed Erica and took her head. He took a picture of Erica while he was being questioned, and he placed a statement underneath it saying, "I'm so sorry that this happened, and I hope that you forgive me for what I have done, and my heart and soul will always love you." Harold Johnson, I shall always miss you. Numerous individuals who exerted great effort to secure justice for Erica found comfort in the charging of the offenders in this case. The public made the decision to bury Erica properly under her true name on August 2005. Unfortunately, Erica's father, Larry Green, was incarcerated at the time. Alvin Brooks, a councilman for Kansas City, said that he and others attempted, but were unable, to obtain authorization from Larry Green to attend the funeral of his daughter. Despite the fact that Erica's family was not present at her funeral, she will always be joyful since so many people worked to secure justice for her. LaWanda Driscoll shared her story of her knowledge of the situation as well. She claimed that Harold had been abusing Erica in the days leading up to her death. LaWanda claimed that Erica's scream from the bedroom was the last thing she heard from her. LaWanda claimed that because Erica was not accustomed to living with her mother and stepfather, she wept a lot and that this caused Harold to hit her even more. Harold would be Erica for everything, no matter how insignificant, she added. LaWanda reported that she overheard Harold saying, "Michelle, I'm going to do something bad, so go take care of your daughter." She now feels the big bang coming from the bedroom a week or so later was the kick that knocked Erica out. Michelle assisted with handing out posters and even shed tears during the girls' vigil, according to LaWanda, when everyone was searching for Precious Doe's identification. LaWanda claims that Michelle was always willing to respond to inquiries about Erica. Harold and Michelle were accused of killing Erica Green on May 5, 2005, putting a child's well-being in peril, leaving a corpse unattended, and tampering with tangible evidence. Michelle was not put on trial until 2007, at which point she entered a guilty plea to second-degree murder and other associated offenses, receiving a 25-year jail sentence. Harold began saying things that would implicate Michelle as soon as he learned that she would be testifying against him. He said that Michelle had never really given Erica any thought. He claimed that on occasion, Michelle would leave Erica alone to go do drugs, but the investigators are already aware of everything he claimed. Harold remained untried until 2008. First-degree murder would not have been the cause of Erica's death, even if her autopsy revealed that she had a closed head injury, a condition that happens when the head strikes an object. However, the neurologist stated in court that if Erica had gotten care in the final hours of her life, she might have lived. Following many days of deliberation, the jury convicted Harold guilty of first-degree murder, child abuse, and endangering the welfare of a child. Harold was given a life sentence without the possibility of release in November 2008. Harold filed an appeal, maintaining his denial that he is the person the state said he is. The state attorney and the defense lawyer exchanged arguments during which Harold's side maintained that the murder was not planned. But according to the state, Erica's murder was planned. Michelle disclosed during her confession that she had instructed Harold to direct Erica exclusively to Marquisia and not to order Erica about the night of Erica's death. According to the state, Harold became irritated by Michelle's statement and considered killing Erica at that very moment. Furthermore, the autopsy reveals that Erica was kicked several times, indicating that Harold continued to kick the young child on purpose while being aware that she might not survive. Harold's decision to appeal the verdict, according to Judge John Torrance, was not indicative of regret. The judge dismissed Harold's appeal, calling him a textbook sociopath who refuses to accept responsibility for his conduct and asserting that the murder was not premeditated. Many were relieved by Erica's sentence, even though the revelation of her identity provided comfort to those who had been rooting for her. Everyone in attendance during Erica's sentence was happy with Harold's decision. However, several others wanted Michelle to receive the same punishment. In addition, Erica's biological father, Larry Green, sued the Oklahoma D.C., raising concerns about the procedures used to decide who gets custody of children born to jailed moms. Nonetheless, the Department of Corrections and the Department of Human Services decided to implement new protocols to guarantee that infants delivered to prisoners will be submitted to the Human Services Department for appropriate treatment. The tragedy of Erica Green serves as a warning that evil exists in human hearts. While it is common knowledge that parents treasure and constantly guard their children, It is horrifying and depressing to learn that some parents would rather preserve themselves than risk anything bad happening to their offspring. Many of the people who are aware of Erica's case have opinions regarding the sentence. Do you also believe that, given Michelle was the biological mother, she ought to have received a harsher sentence? Tell us in the space provided for comments. Thanks for watching.
you.